Hi guys, my name's Dav and welcome to D&DGaming. If this is your first time visiting our channel, we provide honest and in-depth game reviews on a wide range of PC games and review them from the perspective of two experienced gamers. We highly recommend you click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any of our up and coming game reviews. If you find you like this review, remember to give it a thumbs up by hitting that like button. With that said, in for review this time around is simulation game Car Mechanics Simulator 2018. Reviewing the game with me is my brother Dale.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Car Mechanics Simulator 2018 is a simulation game developed by Polish studio Red Dot Games and published by PlayWay. It was released in July 2017 for Microsoft Windows, in February 2019 for Nintendo Switch, and June 2019 for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. The simplified version for mobile platforms was released in June 2018. The game is the third in the Car Mechanics Simulator series, following previous releases in 2014 and 2015, and it is also now a predecessor, Car Mechanics Simulator 2021, which was released in August 2021. As is clear from the name, the game is focused on repairing cars, but does also contain additional features such as being able to modify cars, purchase your own cars either through barn finds or from a showroom, and also testing out cars on a test track and race circuit. So Dav, what were your first impressions?
Well, my first impression of this was, well, let's put it this way, it's obvious, isn't it? It's just, we probably don't need to go any further on this, really. Contents are exactly what it says on the tin.
Yeah, exactly. I'd seen some brief playthroughs of this years ago, and so the rough idea of what to expect, and I think the name is pretty self-explanatory. I didn't expect much, as there is so many of these simulator games, with everything now from bus driving simulators to lawn mowing simulators, and some of them just look like having a second job or something. This is true to some extent with this game, but I did mostly enjoy it overall. So what are your general thoughts following your playthrough?
Although I think it has a large number of faults, I actually really quite enjoyed playing this game. There's something in the mundane aspects of the game that's actually quite enjoyable. I'll try and explain a bit further shortly.
Yeah, there were certainly some positive aspects, and I was quite surprised at how far you could go with some tasks, such as stripping down and rebuilding the engines right down to the internals. And as a car guy myself, this was definitely one of the best parts of the game. Some parts of it have been understandably simplified, but I feel they got the balance right overall. For example, when working on some cars, you can see that some parts of the suspension components just kind of disappear into the bodywork and clearly don't fit with the car properly overall. They obviously had to simplify some parts such as this, otherwise going into the minor details of 50 plus cars or whatever it is would be far too much work for the devs.
So in terms of graphic options, for a simulation type game, there are actually quite a surprising number of options to tweak in the graphics menu, certainly more than what I've seen in most simulation games.
Yeah, I thought they were decent enough options for this type of game. I basically left them all on default in the end.
So in terms of graphics and graphics performance, we'll put our PC specs up on screen as usual, but the game ran with no problems on my PC. The graphics themselves are relatively good. I think simulation games always seem to have a certain style to the graphics, so they tend to be much of a muchness, really.
I thought the graphics for the workshop itself looked good, but some of the car components and the details when close up didn't look great and did seem a bit basic at times. It did mostly run well though. I did find when coming back to the garage from areas such as the test track, it locked up for a few seconds, but nothing major and no major issues with the graphics.
So in terms of player controls, basically mouse for 100% of the time whilst working on the cars, so just left and right mouse clicking. The keyboard is used for the car controls when testing a car, but it's as basic as WASD, and a few other keys to orbit the view and shortcuts to go in and out of the game menus. There is key rebinding available from the controls menu.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. As Dav said, it's predominantly used as the mouse, but the keyboard can be used for the camera view and also driving the cars.
So in terms of the main game mode and mechanics, after selecting to start a new game from the main menu, you start in a kind of tutorial garage containing a few cars. You can interact with the cars and some of the larger garage tools to get a feel for the controls and sub-menus that pop up when interacting with the vehicle. Once you finish looking around to complete the tutorial, you have to head to the test track to test out driving a car. Here you perform a few basic maneuvers and that's pretty much it. On completion, you end up at your garage, a smaller version of the tutorial one basically. You can then begin taking jobs by picking up the phone and selecting a job to take on. Once selected, the car appears just inside the garage entrance. From here, you can choose to move the car from the sub-menu. Moving the car to the car lift to work on it is done automatically by the game, and once over at the lift, you can then begin working on the car. Checking the status from the sub-menu gives you a screen that provides details on the car and a list of items that need attention. Occasionally the list isn't provided, in which case you need to inspect the car and fault find. Generally, fault finding is pretty simple in the game. It uses an item condition system whereby parts with 80 to 100% condition are highlighted as green and are obviously new looking. Used parts with 50 to 80 condition or more are highlighted in yellow, and usually slightly rusty looking parts with 1 to 49% condition are highlighted in red and are completely rusted. This usually makes it pretty obvious by just a visual inspection that the parts need changing. You buy new parts by visiting online parts retailers via the computer on the desk in the garage, and later in the game you can unlock a tablet that allows you to order parts on the go. The parts automatically appear in your inventory list. After going back to the car and selecting the area you want to work on by clicking a part in that area of the car, you then select part mount from the menu wheel, and a ghost image of the part will appear in place. When you click to add the part, the game will show all those same parts from your inventory, and you simply select the one you want to fit and then hold the left mouse button to fit it. Once you finish placing the parts, you can click on the car status from the menu wheel and select finish job. Once you do, the car disappears and money for the job gets added to your UI icon. As you gain money, you can visit barns located on the map and buy barn find cars. You can strip them down, replace parts in bad condition and modify them with more powerful engines and parts, modify gearboxes, exhausts, exterior and interior body parts. And once you unlock the paint booth, you can respray the cars. As you complete jobs, you gain experience points, which can then be used to improve things such as dismantle and assemble speeds, diagnostic tools, additional garage expansion such as an additional car lift and a paint booth, and money off in the online parts shop. To use the points you've gained, you click on the toolbox to access the menu.
So in terms of other game modes, there's a car showroom. This mode has a list of the cars in the game, and you click on a car to review the car, open and close doors, change the colour and decals, show or hide the body, and most pointlessly of all, show rust. The stupid thing about this is that the rust shows on the car body but not on the engine, so far from realistic, a rather pointless mode. There's also the car editor. This is a nice idea but badly incorporated. Basically, the car editor allows you to create a car from scratch with the ability of lots of fine tuning of individual parts. The issue here is that the mode itself felt like they just left the car creator that they'd used to build the car models for the game in the game by accident. The mode has a game engine feel to the controls and the options you choose from, but it's no instructions or tutorial on how to do anything, and as the menus are nothing like the main game menus, it doesn't make sense with the rest of the game. If they're built in more like the main game itself with recognisable menus and some kind of tutorial to it, then it could have been a really good mode. Unfortunately, it just felt janky, and when I hit the quit button, rather than going back to the main menu, it just quits completely out of the game.
So in terms of UI, there are 4 icons in the top right of the screen. These are level, XP, jobs waiting and money earned. A yellow box in the top left tells you the parts mode that you currently have selected, such as parts dismantle or parts selection. A help bar appears at the middle bottom of the screen that shows mouse control options for focusing on parts and mounting or removing parts. When you hover over a part, text comes up in the center of the screen with the part name, and a box comes up in the bottom left that has an image of the part. A bar highlighting its condition and also how accessible it is, highlighted by some green, yellow or orange dots. The more accessible parts will have a green dot, somewhat accessible have 2 yellow dots, and inaccessible parts have 3 orange dots. If the condition of the part is unknown, a question mark will be shown.
I thought the UI was generally done quite well, and you can also use the right click on the mouse to bring up the context menu, which gives you quick access to basically everything you need. The on-screen icon showed basic information, as Dav said, such as how much money you have and how many jobs are available, and it certainly had everything I needed to see at a glance. So what did you think in terms of the sound and music?
Well, the environment sounds are okay. It has typical sounds playing in the background that you'd hear at a garage, such as air compressor, but one of the sounds I noticed when putting parts on and taking them off sounded terrible. It sounds more like you're changing some clothes, not a car part. For music, there's a radio that has a range of 9 radio stations to choose from, yet the music does get a bit repetitive after a while of playing. The radio stations are too similar in style too. In a nutshell, you get a choice between 6 dance type stations, 2 rock stations and 1 classic station. Bit of a weird mix, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought the sounds of the tools were quite realistic, although not much variety in the sounds, and I think they could have added more for some of the tools for sure. The music definitely seems to be focused mostly on the drum and bass type soundtrack, which gets you kind of going at first, and really sets the mood for the game. But it does quickly get repetitive, and I think they could have had a wider range of music genres. It does seem like they really didn't want to license anything for this game.
So in terms of bugs and glitches, I found a few floating parts, but other than this, it wasn't too bad on this front.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. When you've taken a few parts off, there's always a bit like floating. I think it's like the front knuckle is one of them. And yeah, I think they could have got around this by just the order in which you actually remove them. But in terms of bugs and glitches, really, I didn't have any other than that slight locking up issue I mentioned earlier on.
So to sum up, things I liked about the game, there's something in the mundaneness of this game. On the outset, a car mechanic simulation game sounds really boring. But there's something quite satisfying about fault finding, ordering the parts you need, fixing the car and finishing the job. It kind of feels like work, but at the same time it doesn't, if you like cars, that is. Rather than just working on customer cars, as you get money you can buy barn find cars or showroom cars and modify them, which I thought was a good touch. Just constantly working on custom cars with no real aim would have got very old very quickly. There are quite a few different cars with different engine types that come in as jobs. Most of the cars are quite obvious copies of real brands, but with different names, but I guess that kind of makes them recognisable to a point. The engines range from inline 3, 4 and 6 cylinder engines to V6 and V8 engines, and they can be quite different to work on with different parts required.
In terms of things I liked about it, even though simplified, it's very well done in terms of the interface used for assembling and disassembling the vehicles, and it's very simple to grasp, even if you don't have much knowledge of various car components. Does actually feel like you're learning something from the game as well, with all the various parts of the process that are simulated. It's a fairly vast range of different parts, although I feel they could have expanded more on the modified parts, as these were mostly engine based, and there are no options to upgrade the suspension or brake calipers and discs, for example. I thought the barn finds is a nice addition, and because you never know what you're going to come across, it adds a bit of excitement to it. The only problem with this is they do disappear after you visit them once, so if you miss out on a good find, you've got to hope you come across something similar later on.
So in terms of things I didn't like in this game, it's very grindy. To buy your first car, you have to take on and complete a lot of jobs, and then once you do manage to buy one, to do anything to it, you need to grind more to get more money to put into it. I get it that this is the process, but it could be made easier by, say, a garage expansion that allows you to take on staff to do jobs for you. You wouldn't necessarily have to see the other mechanics, it just could be implied, and the money they make from the additional work goes into bolstering the overall garage. That way you could afford the cars and car parts to modify them much quicker. I really think that there should be more customer interaction in the game. Rather than just picking up a phone and the car appearing by the entrance, I think it would have been better to have actual character models as customers, even if they just appear on the screen as an image. That way it feels more like you're completing jobs for a customer, not just a random phone call. And the same with completing a job rather than the car just disappearing. Actually being able to drive the car over to the car lift in the garage would also have been far better than just simply the car appearing over there. The level of detail of undoing nuts and bolts, etc. in the parts was really good, but I do feel they could have gone further with this. Nuts and bolts and the parts just simply disappear and then reappear when you select the part mount mode. But I think it would have been better to make use of the parts bench, and that the parts could appear on the bench once taken off the car. From here, the parts could then be selected and taken to the car for assembly. That way you'd actually learn a bit more as you play, and it would be a bit more challenging rather than just the part bolts reappearing in front of you where you simply can't go wrong. It makes it too easy and a bit too repetitive. Although, to be fair, I did spill oil a number of times. I forgot to drain the oil before taking the oil pan off, so things can be done in the wrong order still at times. Although there seemed to be all the main car and engine parts, there were a number of car parts I noticed missing, including engine mounts, gaskets, which are a very important part of the engine, and ancillaries. The lack of engine mounts meant that you could take the front subframe off and the engine would just be floating with nothing beneath it. Engine mounts would have ensured that it still looked connected to the car at least, and not just floating in the engine bay. With the ancillaries, I wouldn't expect that you'd remove every wire, but they could at least be bundled together and called ancillaries or something that you initially remove and then replace, and that would have at least been something. Whilst we're talking about engine detail, the oil you remove from the car before removing the oil pan is the same colour as the new oil you put in. So there's a real lack of detail there. I know it probably sounds like I'm being picky, but this is a simulation game, and therefore it's simulating car mechanics, and so should be as close as possible to the real thing. Selling car parts that are in bad condition that you've removed from the car to clear them out of the inventory just got really annoying. Most of the car parts only sell for a few dollars, and even when there is a car part with only 1% condition and it sells for $0, it still says the word sell part. It also needed a select multiple option, as you actually have to go through clicking on every individual part to sell it. Why not have an option when you finish fixing the car to sell all parts from that car as a bundle for a price, or if it's $0, then the stuff could just get binned.
Yeah, in terms of things I didn't like, one of my main gripes was the last point that Dav mentioned, actually, that it would have been nice when selling the used parts to be able to select more than one at a time, as this took ages to go through and sell the parts individually. I did notice that by using enter on the keyboard, you could kind of quickly tap with the mouse button, then enter to sell immediately, but it still took ages. I did notice there were view issues at times with the camera zooming in on parts when you didn't want it to, and then focusing on some parts when you wanted to be on others. Even though there are a few radio stations, I still found the music gets very repetitive. One of the other big gripes for me was the progression and pacing of the game is far too slow and is far too grindy. For example, if you want to unlock the paint shop, you have to unlock over 30 levels in order to get to it.
So in terms of missed opportunities, Dale, do you think there's any in this one?
But it would have been nice to see licensed manufacturers in the base game instead of the made-up names based on, well, clearly actual cars. I understand the DLC has licensed manufacturers, but I don't think you should have to pay out for this. And the same with the music. And as I mentioned earlier, it seems they just really didn't want to license anything for it. Because they could have improved on some of the realism aspects when dismantling the vehicles. As it is, every bolt just comes out easily with no issues. Whereas they could have had stuff such as seized bolts that required drilling out, or broken parts that required an extraction type minigame. This would have just added more variety, and, well, frankly, when you've got these rusted parts on the car, you wouldn't expect the bolts to come out so easily.
Yeah, so from my point of view on missed opportunities, option to buy additional diagnostic tools would have been good and far more realistic, rather than just earning points and spending them in your toolbox to get the diagnostic tools. I really do feel they missed the opportunity to take this to a more detailed level and to be a proper simulator. Instead, it just felt a bit too dumbed down in its detail, and simulators should never feel like that. They're all about the detail. So in terms of scores, what do you think on this one, Dale?
But I mostly enjoyed this one, even though at times it did feel like a huge grind. Some of its simulation aspects are also a little questionable, as it's not going as far as teaching you what you need to know or how to work on your own cars. We'll show you the basic parts of the vehicle, where they're located and how they go together, but it really could go into more detail, as it does call itself a simulator. It's a lot of unrealistic shortcuts and some need-to-know knowledge that just isn't covered. The game is good overall, though. If you're looking to just learn the basics of vehicle mechanics and how they're put together, it does the job. And so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
I do really feel they stopped short with this game, which is a bit disappointing. It feels like if they'd gone a bit further with a more realistic way of receiving, managing and finishing the jobs with actual customer interaction of some sort, and fix some obvious areas of lacking detail, such as being able to finish a job with the car still on the lifter, or car parts that have others removed around them and are just left floating, and this could have been a really great game. They may well have picked up some of these issues in the latest Car Mechanics Simulator 2021. Strangely, having said that, I do have to say, for all its faults, I did actually enjoy the game. There is a certain sense of achievement to it, and I found myself wanting to keep playing, especially once I've managed to buy my first barn find and start doing it up. So this brought my scoring of the game back up slightly from the pit of shit where it was for its faults initially, up to just over the middle of the road score of 6.5 out of 10. Well guys, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and comment. Hit that bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, and we'll see you in the next one.